James Bond, weapons, Berettas, Walther PPKs, silencers, and more. Today we talk with a weapons expert, Tom Whiteman of Legacy Collectibles, all about Major Boothroyd's weapon of choice for James Bond. Hi, this is Dan Silvestri.
And Tom Pizzato.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Let's go! First of all, welcome, Tom, to our Cracking the Code of Spy Movie show. We're all excited to have you with us today and to see and to hear about a real Walther PPK. So if you're listening, folks out there, you can check out our YouTube channel too. It's also called Cracking the Code of Spy Movies, and you can see what we're talking about here too.
Hey, it's great to be on your show, and so I'm going to be showing you some really cool guns like this Walther PPK. You obviously need to go on the YouTube channel and check this out.
Yeah, he's holding up a beautiful, real Walther PPK.
Yeah.
Holy
Look
geez.
at that. Just shiny finish here. Just a beautiful gun.
It is.
7.65, also known as 32 caliber. But we'll get into the details in a bit.
Yeah. All right.
Very nice. All right, so Tom, can you explain to us what it is you do and how you do it? How long you've been doing it? And how'd you learn so much about guns? Just kind of give us a little background there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not your typical gun guy because I actually don't hunt and I rarely shoot. But I love history. So just like you guys love spy movies, I've been watching war movies and the History Channel all of my life, over and over and over again. Can't get enough of it. I'm a psychologist by trade, so I worked in the counseling business for 25 years.
Wow.
But during that time, yeah, I know, and I'm still relatively sane. But during that time, I was collecting guns. Now, there's two different worlds there. The world of psychology and counseling, you don't even talk about or mention hobbies like gun collecting. And so I was going to gun shows on the weekends. I bought my first Luger when I was in college, bought a PPK soon thereafter. I specialize in World War II guns.
Okay.
But of course, when I watch James Bond or any war movie, actually, I always will freeze frame and check it out. What's he holding there?
Probably laser focus on the weapons.
And by the way, James Bond has really helped my business because everybody calls and they want a Walther PPK, and I say, why do you like Walther PPKs? Because that's what James Bond has. So
isn't that amazing?
It does help my business.
That's amazing.
You said helps out my business. You do have a lot of older guns. What's the website people can go to?
Okay, so legacy-collectibles.com. It's Legacy Collectibles is the name of the business right here. Yep. Legacy-collectibles.com, and I have all eras from flintlocks up to, we actually have some modern guns, but we try not to sell modern guns. We try to keep it 1945 or earlier.
Wow, that's cool. All right.
It's very cool. I love what I do. Like I said, I sold my practice and I started this business with my son because he said, Dad, why don't we start selling some of your guns? And that just, I now have 5 employees. And
cool.
We might sell 100 guns a week.
No kidding. That's pretty cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we're going to get into the James Bond stuff and talk about one of our favorite guns in the James Bond series, as we mentioned. So we know Bond carried a Beretta for a while in the Fleming books, and I think it was a Beretta 418.
But at the end of the novel, From Russia with Love, Bond's gun, with the silencer on it, I believe, gets caught in his trousers as he's trying to pull the gun out. And that was dangerous. It almost cost him his life.
Yes.
And so in the next novel,
Dr. No, a certain Major Boothroyd recommended that Bond switch guns. And as an aside, in 1956, the real Geoffrey Boothroyd, who was a firearms expert in Scotland, he wrote to Fleming saying that though he enjoyed the novels and stuff, he really didn't think a Beretta suited 007, and he told him, hey, here's a number of other guns you might consider. And so eventually Fleming settled on the Walther PPK. So again, like we always do, Tom and I, we dig into stuff. We want to know, what the heck is PPK and PP? What's all that about, right? So we looked it up, and the Walther PPK was derived from a company, this guy, Carl Walther, and he had a Sportswaffens model PP, and it stood for Police Pistole, and so it was a police pistol. That's what it was made for. And so, okay, that's pretty cool. Then the police department said, hey, we have detectives. We need something a little smaller, a little lighter, whatever. Can you make one for our detectives? And so he came up with the Police Pistole Criminale, or the police pistol for detectives. So that's the PPK. So now we're going to talk to you, an expert on firearms and the PPK, about the PPK. So Boothroyd said, hey.
Nice and light, in a lady's handbag. No stopping power. I've never missed with a jet.
Yeah, maybe not, but it jammed on your last job and you spent 6 months in hospital in consequence. If you carry a 00 number, it means you're licensed to kill, not get killed. And another thing, since I've been head of MI7, there's been a 40% drop in 00 operative casualties, and I want it to stay that way. You'll carry the Walther. Unless, of course, you prefer to go back to standard intelligence duties.
No, sir. I would not.
Then from now on, you carry a different gun. Show him, Amra.
Walther PPK. 7.65 mil with a delivery like a brick through a plate glass window. Takes a Brausch silencer with very little reduction in muzzle velocity. The American CIA swear by them.
Thank you, Major Boothroyd.
All right, Tom. Is the Beretta a gun that belongs in a lady's handbag and not in Bond's holster? and does the Walther PPK have the stopping power like a brick through a plate glass window?
Well, there's a little exaggeration there, but yes, I have to say the Beretta, it's a small handgun. There's actually a picture of one, and it fits in the palm of somebody's hand. So it is a small gun. Walther, by the way, also made a Model 8 and a Model 9, and they actually, when they made them, they sold them with little ladies' handbags with them. So
really?
Instead of a holster, you'd put them in a lady's handbag. So I actually agree. It's probably more suited for a lady's handbag.
Yeah.
And the 25 caliber is, I mean, there's no police department or any detective worth their salt that would carry a 25 caliber. It's just it's not much bigger than a 22 caliber. You always hear stories about 25 caliber, 22 caliber wouldn't kill anybody. Well, if you're a good shot and you get it in the right place, it'll kill somebody. But in terms of stopping power, if somebody's coming right at you and you put 3 bullets in him, he's probably going to still keep coming at you unless you strategically put it between his eyes. So I would have to agree with that assessment that the Beretta 418 was not a good choice for James Bond.
Okay.
It is a lady's pistol.
All right. And
in terms of the kick on that, so I've only shot a Beretta. I've not shot a Walther yet. What is there a difference in the kick that you've got to deal with? Given that the Walther's bigger?
Yeah, only depending on the caliber of the bullet. So if you shot a Beretta 22 or a 25, there's very little kick. A 32 caliber, and again, in Europe, it's 7.65 because they go by millimeters. But in the United States, it's a 32 caliber bullet, which is a pretty common bullet, and it has a fair amount of kick. Okay. Now, you can buy a Walther PPK, PP or PPK in 9mm. That'll give you a heavy kick. In fact, the gun that I was showing you, this Walther PPK, and one of the reasons James Bond would like it is Walther. Well, Germans were known for having the best weapons technology in the world, which was a real unfortunate fact for us in World War II. You know, they had jets, but way before we did, and they developed these guns way before we did. And in fact, what I'm showing you, this has an aluminum frame.
Okay.
So it's really light. And now the barrel is stainless steel and the slide is metal, but the frame is aluminum. This was all experimental at the time, but they pulled it off. And it was great for the criminal police. You could keep it in your vest pocket. It's very light. And all that is to say, but you put a 9mm in this, and it's liable to crack the frame. It's almost too much jarring. So 9mm is a little too much for this gun, but a 7.65 gives you the stopping power that you need in terms of a brick going through a plate glass. I don't know. I just know it has good penetration, and I do think it's a good caliber for somebody who wants to keep it in their vest pocket.
Okay. All right. So it looked like it's a 32 caliber is what Bond is using, and we've seen things that said a 32 ACP. And is that applied to this gun, though? Because it seems like that's automatic Colt pistol that stands for, doesn't it?
Yes, that's actually the length of the cartridge. So it has more to do with the amount of powder that's in the bullet. So So, like, for example, a 38 Special and a 357 Magnum are the same size, except the cartridge on a 357 Magnum is a lot longer, more powder, and therefore more power.
Okay. All right. So we were going to ask about what's the difference between millimeter and caliber, and I think you've explained a little bit of it. Yeah. So the 7.6 millimeter gun that Bond uses is a 32 caliber.
Correct. ACP, to be technically correct. If you're going to the store to buy the ammo, it would be 32 ACP. Okay. I think I have one. There you go.
Oh, there he's holding
There's
up
the cartridge right there.
It's a piece of a bullet.
What everybody uses on police departments and stuff is usually a 9 millimeter. You know, they always talk about a 9 millimeter Glock. Yeah. So you can see the difference.
Oh, the Glock, right? Yeah.
This has a lot. This is longer. Just a little bit wider. Right. So instead of, it's the size of the hole going in.
So which one's wider, Don?
And then this is hollow point, which makes a bigger hole going out. Okay. So this has plenty of stopping power. This is going to have more kick. This is the 9 millimeter is going to have more kick.
Okay.
And this is preferred by, as you know, most police departments and many in the military will use a 9 millimeter cartridge.
Okay. Now in the movie.
So I'm actually impressed that you have some, because my understanding is there's a shortage on ammo right now.
Well, to be honest, that's been in my drawer for about 2 years. Fortunately, I've never used it.
Hey, there you go.
So that's good.
All right, that's only for when somebody comes in who's not invited.
Be warned out there. All right. In the movie, Boothroyd says that the American CIA swears by the Walther PPK. Now, did the CIA ever really use a Walther PPK? I was poking around. I couldn't find that.
Well, we were talking a little bit before the show that the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, that was the CIA in World War II, and they used a smaller version of the Colt 1911. It was actually a 1903 Colt. So again, it's a smaller version, and it uses a 380 caliber, which is the same as 9 millimeter. Okay. But the Americans have always preferred a higher caliber bullet. Okay. So for our Army side piece, in fact, the Germans sent us examples before we went to war with Germany. They were trying to sell guns to the U.S. Army, and they had the nerve to send us a gun that was 30 caliber. And the Army said, "You've got to be kidding me." So they said, "How about 9 millimeter?" And they said, "You got to be kidding me." And so that's how we ended up with a 45 caliber 1911. Now, I don't have that cartridge in here, but that is one huge bullet.
I would
imagine. A 45 caliber is a lot of power. So the OSS used a smaller, similar to the 1911, but just shrunk down a little bit, and they would use a 9 millimeter bullet.
Okay, so most likely the CIA wasn't using Walther PPKs like they say in the movie, but we do see in the movie Felix Leiter, who's holding a gun on James Bond, and Felix Leiter is a CIA agent. He's holding a gun on James Bond at Pussfeller's Jamaican bar. Now, is that gun, and we had a couple of pictures we showed you on that, is that gun that Felix Leiter is holding, is that a Walther PPK?
It looks very much like it is. However, I believe, because I checked out the barrel length, so this is the PP.
Okay.
And this is the PPK.
All right, we're holding up. Tom's holding up both guns.
All right, I'm gonna put one over the other.
Okay.
I'll try to line them up, and I'll describe it. The PP is only about a half an inch longer.
Okay.
And if you look at the button, let's look at it this way.
Mm-hmm.
The PP is a half inch longer on the frame and also on the barrel.
Okay.
So that half inch gives you a little more accuracy, because the longer the barrel, the more accurate. But it also adds one extra round. So the PPK holds 7 rounds. The PP will hold 8.
Okay,
now,
that's good.
When I looked at the picture, and it's actually this side, and you can see, when I look at from here to here, and that's from the ejection port to the end, it looks to me like he's carrying a Walther PP, and James Bond has a PPK. So all it does is give him one extra round.
Okay.
The internal parts are most of the internal parts are completely exchangeable. So if I break a part on here, I can take a PPK part and put it in the PP. It'll work fine.
Oh, okay. All right. So at least they're consistent in the movie when they're saying that the CIA uses the PPK. Hey, there we got Felix Leiter holding a PP, Walther PPK. Or PP. He's holding a PP, right?
The PP, not the PPK.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to be careful how you say that. He was holding a PP.
He's holding a Walther PP. All right.
I'm not going there.
Yeah, we just leave that alone. I do that when I do some YouTube videos, and I often will say something in those regards, and the comments are voluminous.
I would imagine.
Now, Boothroyd mentions a silencer when he's talking about the gun, and it sounded like he said a barrage silencer. What kind of silencer would have been around in '62 when they made the movie, and how much does a silencer really silence?
Yeah.
Good question. And, just a historical fact, Hiram Maxim, which made one of the early machine guns, actually, he invented the silencer all the way back in about 1910. Oh. So they've been around for a long time. They weren't in wide use. Theodore Roosevelt actually liked the silencer, and he would put it on his rifle when he went hunting. So they were around for a long time, but then suddenly they became more popular, I think, from spy movies and things like that. You still will hear a bang. So when the bullet discharges, the striker hits the powder. That will make a bang no matter what, and it's about like a small firecracker.
Oh.
But the biggest bang comes from breaking the sound barrier as the bullet comes out, and it makes the bang as in breaking the sound barrier. So one of the things that the silencer will do is slow down the exit of the bullet so that you muffle that. You don't have that. You have the first bang of the powder igniting, but you don't have that louder bang that comes from breaking the sound barrier. I actually have a silencer here.
Oh, we're
and
looking at
if James Bond, yeah. I can pull up a Thompson machine gun too if you'd like. But if you thread, you would have to thread the barrel. They would extend the barrel about a 1/4 inch and thread it, and then you just screw that on, and that's what James Bond's gun is going to look like with a silencer on it. There's a lot of different makers today. There's dozens of makers. They're fairly simple, even though they're expensive. They're fairly simple. But I had never heard of the Barrage. But when you guys asked about it, I looked it up, and they do make silencers. However, in the 60s, of course, when James Bond would have been buying his silencer, H&K, they made the best, and they were the biggest supplier of silencers in the 60s. So I would say if James Bond was a real person, he definitely had an H&K silencer. But for some reason, somebody picked the Barrage, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Part of the thing is in the movie, the silencer he used couldn't have done what they tried to do because it wasn't screwed on. It was actually for the movie a wooden dowel, so he could just take it off easily, just slide it in the chamber and out, or in the barrel and out.
Yeah.
But, these do screw on, and sometimes it can be a little awkward. So, if James Bond, somebody sneaks up on him, he just wants to pull this out really quickly and shoot. He's not going to store this, with the silencer on it, he's not going to store that in his vest. So, if you're out on an assignment, like he's hiding in the bushes, then he has time to pull out the silencer, attach it to the PPK, and take his shot. But, when you're in a running gun battle, you don't want to be fiddling with a silencer. That's just my opinion.
Sure. Have the silencers gotten better now? Are they completely silent? I saw a video on YouTube of this one guy firing a Walther PPK, and he had I think a .22 rimfire caliber suppressor, and he said it was like 6.5 inches long or what, and he fired it, and it was pretty silent.
Here's a clip from that YouTube video I'm talking about from 704 Tactical.
Today I want to suppress this .22 James Bond gun with this little suppressor and see how it sounds. These cans are so lightweight and they have a monocore baffle design, making them nearly silent. And this is just a really cool James Bond package. Let's take some shots with this thing and see how quiet it actually is. All right, guys. First shots out of this Walther PPK with this Hughes Precision .22 suppressor.
Kind of like the movie.
It sounds actually more like an air rifle.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
and so a good example, one of the reasons I have this silencer is there's no place around me where I can shoot that the neighbors won't complain. But I had a pretty isolated area, and I would put some cans off of my deck and put on the silencer with a 22. Now keep in mind the 22 is going to have a much softer bang to it. If you put this on a 45 caliber, you're going to hear a pop.
Yeah.
But all you hear is just it almost sounds like a puff of air.
Yeah.
And the neighbors could never call the police, and I never heard any animals in the
in the making of this video.
Yeah, in the making of the video, I swear I never heard an animal, but it's something, because people say, why do you need a silencer? Well, now you know.
All right. So the Walther PPK, as you mentioned, is a German pistol, and the Germans were good at weaponry, as you mentioned, for World War II and so on. And it was issued to James Bond in Fleming novel Dr. No, and of course in the movie we saw. We were just talking about all that. When the transition to the big screen, the Walther PPK became Bond's primary weapon, and it was featured really from Dr. No in 1962 all the way through 1997, Tomorrow Never Dies. But interestingly, when they were filming Dr. No, the props did not show up in time. And so Bernard Lee, who plays M, brought his own very real Walther PPK for the filming. And there were only 2 Walther PPKs that were used in the movie, or 2 Walters that were used in the movie. And one of them sold at an auction in 2020 for $256,000. Holy jeez. Wow. All right.
Wow.
So
that sounds like there's a James Bond premium on that one.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, I never heard that story. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And of course, we know the weapon referred to in the film is the Walther PPK by M and Bernard Lee, like we said. But in actuality, the production people used the Walther PP, which I think they said was a 38 caliber ACP.
They do make them. They make them in 32 and 38.
Okay, so maybe that's what the prop guys used then. So wow, that's pretty wild. So.
All right, so Tom, I do have one question. We've talked about the PP, we've talked about the PPK, and I've also read about a PPK/S. What's the /S mean?
Excellent question, and it's not all that exciting. Basically, the S was made for the American market, and that was in 1986. The import laws in the United States changed so that you could import a Walther PP, but you could not import a PPK. And the reason was the barrel and the frame were not long enough. They were trying to do away with, the small sidearms that people were using to kill people. Now today, we kill people with just about everything. But back in 1986, they were trying to do away with what they called Saturday night specials. And so the PPK was banned from coming to the United States. So Walther, and of course, we were a huge part of their market. So they got around it by changing the length of the barrel and the length of the frame just a little bit to call it the PPK-S. I don't know if it holds enough, if it's enough to hold an extra round. But then they also added to the PP. They made a PP Super, which had held a few more rounds. So they played around with different sizes to appeal to the American market. Mm-hmm. But that's all that was. It was just trying to get the right length that would get through our customs laws.
Okay, all right, that's weird.
All right, thank you.
Because in World War II, didn't the military make a gun called the Liberator, and they were going to try to distribute it through the French Resistance and everything?
Somewhere. But,
oh, really?
Yeah, no, that's a great story. I actually did a YouTube video about the Liberator, but they made something like 1 million of those Liberators in a matter of 3 months, and it was like 300 women made 1 million Liberators. They were a cheap 45 caliber one-shot gun. Yeah, that was an OSS operation, by the way. They dropped them behind enemy lines in France and different occupied countries, and then also in Asia. And so with that 45 caliber, you would only get one bullet, but you would walk up to a guy with a machine gun, and he'd say, "Give me your papira." And you would pull out your Liberator and shoot him and take his gun. So it was meant to be shot and dropped.
Wow.
I think it was like 20 cents per gun is the production cost.
Wow. Yeah.
Did they have serial numbers on them?
No, there was no rifling, so that you had to be up close and personal. No rifling just mean they were very inaccurate.
You had to be up close.
And no
basically.
serial numbers, no markings whatsoever, because they didn't want them to be able to trace them back.
Yeah, yeah. And it
Boy,
wasn't.
that sounds like a gun by the mob.
It wasn't used all that much, though, right? I mean, in reality, it didn't work all that well. I mean, it didn't work out that well.
No, in reality, they said about 90% of them were dumped in the ocean because what they found was it just backfired. You know, they would do a drop and the Japanese would capture them all. So it didn't work out real well. But if you read, there's different stories because the OSS says it was wildly successful, but they just never told anybody. And then other people said it was a complete waste of money. So it depends on who you read.
Yeah, as everything is in life. It depends on who you're talking
changed.
to.
Yeah, I was going to say that hasn't changed. Huge success.
Yeah. All right. So we know Bond's not using a Liberator, that's for sure. Yeah. So why was the Walther PPK a good choice for Bond?
You know, it's always had a mystique. I would like to tell you that it's better than every other gun, but it really isn't. Now, they were the first to come up with the design they did, and then, of course, everybody copied it. In fact, the United States tried to copy it. They ended up buying, Smith & Wesson bought the Walther company and brought it over to the United States. But the bottom line was when people bought a Walther, they always wanted to see made in Germany. So after the war, for a short period of time, they were made in France. And we get those from time to time, and people will say, oh, I don't want one of those. I want one made in Germany. So it really is the mystique of a Walther PPK. They first started making them in 1930. It was way ahead of their time. The design is in double action, which means if I can just pull the trigger and it'll fire, or you can cock it and it'll fire. Okay. So this is a double action. It's got sleek lines. It's a cool looking pistol. The Beretta, by the way, is very boxy. This is not the same variation, but it's very boxy.
Tom's holding
up a Beretta. It does not work in double action. So the PPK is definitely an improvement.
Okay.
But now it's just, it's almost like the BMW or the Mercedes. It's got a mystique of its own. It's well made. And if you're British, I don't know how many British listeners you have, but they don't really have any handguns to compete with the Walther PPK. They had the Webley, which is a big, bulky revolver, and any spy is going to prefer a German-made. Actually, the best small caliber pistols were made in Belgium, Germany, and the United States.
Okay.
If you were a spy, what gun would you want to use to carry around?
I would probably carry the Walther PP or PPK just because they're reliable and they're accurate.
Yeah.
Trying to think on a U.S. gun, I don't know. The 1903 Colt is a little bulky. I like the Walther PP and PPK.
Yeah. Now,
what about the Glocks? Because I know, like in U.S. Marshals, they use Glock is his gun of choice.
Yeah, and I wanted to make the point that everybody now, and that's the thing about James Bond. He's a classic guy, shaken not stirred. He wants his drink a certain way. He wants his car a certain way. He wants his women a certain way. But the Glocks are made a lot of plastic, and American law enforcement likes it. It shoots 9mm, and you can put 15 rounds in that thing because they use a stackable, so it's a much thicker handle, so the bullets stack in there. In the future, maybe James Bond would say, "Hey, I'd rather have a plastic gun. It's light. I mean, there are metal parts, obviously, but the plastic gun." Having more rounds in the chamber are helpful. I could see him moving in that direction, but it's funny because a lot of Americans, they'll say to me, I don't want one of those plastic guns. I want a classic, well-made, solid, reliable gun like the Walther PPK.
Okay. I mean, is this a semi-automatic? What is the classification of a Walther?
This is considered a semi-automatic. It's a little more complicated because you have to first have a bullet in the chamber. So you're walking around, there's no bullet in the chamber. You pull the trigger, nothing happens. So you do lock and load. Okay. You have to cock it and put one in the chamber. Where as opposed to with a revolver, see if the people are listening, you can hear that.
Yeah, that's cool.
If you have a revolver, and women will sometimes call me and say, I want a protection piece. That would be a lady's gun, by the way. I often will recommend a revolver because you just point and shoot.
Yeah.
But with the semi-automatic, you usually have more rounds. They're accurate. They're reliable. You just have to be careful. The same disadvantage of having to cock it The other problem is once it's cocked and you take the magazine out, there's still a bullet in there.
Yeah.
So people will clean their gun
Oh.
and they'll take this out and they'll say, oh, it's empty, but the bullet in the chamber. And if that goes off, you're going to shoot someone or something.
Yeah.
So you have to know what you're doing. It takes a lot more practice with a semi-automatic and know what you're doing so that you don't accidentally shoot something.
Yeah. Now, when Bond's walking around with this, he's got a bullet in the chamber because he's ready, right? He's got it. Does the double action actually help prevent him from accidentally firing it at himself while it's in a holster or something because you have to do something else?
No, but the safety would. So when he's walking around, he can have it loaded, ready to go. He can even have it cocked, but he has the safety on, so he can't accidentally. So when you point to fire, you want to. I'll do it this way. You just
we're watching.
Pop the safety. Pop the safety up and then pull. So the revolver, generally, the revolvers don't have a safety because the bullets are in there, and you just point and shoot.
Yeah.
James Bond, though, being a classic guy, would always have his safety on.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. That's good. So I think Tom asked you what you would recommend. I mean, if you were the quartermaster who provides the gadgets and weaponry to James Bond, which weapon would you suggest Bond use in the future? Say, the next James Bond movie.
Yeah.
What could he be using?
You mentioned, I think, a P5 he used, a P99. This is actually a P22, but that's what the P99, this actually has a laser sight.
Oh.
A P99 looks a little bit like this. Actually, the look is the same, but it's a little bigger. I didn't have a P99 available, but this is my little 22 caliber laser sight, and James Bond definitely would use the laser sight because that's what Q would give him.
Okay.
So you turn on the laser, you just put it on the target, and this does have some plastic parts. Now, he wouldn't do the camouflage.
Right.
Because that's kind of cheesy looking. He would have, it does come in black.
And what is this model now?
You can get a flashlight attached to it, but it'll chamber more rounds. This is like more state of the art and a little bit more like the Glock, but it is a classic Walther. So this is the P22, and then one of the movies he used the P99.
Yeah.
So if you get a young,
that was how Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah, and I could see in the future. I think the future gun for James Bond is going to be more about the ammunition, because I do think he would like 9mm.
Mm-hmm.
He would like more rounds in the chamber because when he gets in running street battles or he's on a motorcycle, and he was on the motorcycle and he's shooting behind him, and you have to have more rounds. But I also think that the future James Bond is going to have, Q's going to give him special bullets that are heat-seeking. Or, you point it toward the person and it'll track them down. So there's microchips in the ammunition, I think, is the way of the future for James Bond.
Really? Is that a reality now, or is that something?
It actually is, but
no
I'm told they can't tell me anything about it or they'd have to kill me. But I did see that snipers are now using bullets that will track the enemy. I think the ultimate would be if you have DNA, that it would track you by your DNA so that, you get the bad guy and not bystander. I think we're a ways from that.
Yeah.
But we are not, I don't think we're very far. In fact, I'm sure they have in development bullets that are heat signature. You get somebody who's hiding around the corner and it'll find you.
Oh, man. Wow. That's going to be something. Holy.
Yeah. So if, the producers of that movie, I want a royalty for that idea, by the
way. I'm sure there'll be a check in the mail.
Yeah, right.
All right, that's cool. So,
I was gonna ask the question. So,
go ahead.
All right. Looking on LinkedIn, I see that you're actively involved with rehab after work and something called life management. Was that your psychology business, or is there something else with those?
Yeah, Life Management was the corporation, but I had a counseling center, Life Counseling, and so I worked there as a psychologist. I actually was the founder and president. Rehab After Work was a drug and alcohol program. So we first were doing mental health, mostly marriage and family, teenagers in trouble, things like that. And we worked with most major insurers. But at one point, we decided to add drug and alcohol, which is a whole different way of counseling people. So I had to hire all different people to come in. And so we ran drug and alcohol programs along with mental health programs. And the whole time I was doing that, I was collecting guns. But as I said, the two populations don't mix well. So I tried to keep everybody apart. So when
two sides of town.
So one story you'll appreciate. When I sold the business, and when I sold it, the people who bought it, they said, now if we buy this business, we need you to sign a 5-year non-compete. Well, already in my head, I was thinking, well, I'm going to go start this gun business and I'm going to enjoy life a lot more. So I said, I'm sorry, that won't work for me. And I said, no, make it 10 or it's not a deal. So I left that business. It was very rewarding, but some days were very, very difficult. And what I do now is what I love, and we're just having a great time and selling a little bit of history.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. So you mostly have World War II or from 1945 and before weapons?
1945 and before.
Okay.
And if people check out our YouTube channel, we have a lot of vet bringbacks. So what I try to do is I look up the history of the vet and what he did. We just did one today on a guy who won a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. He was wounded in an artillery barrage. He brought back actually 3 guns. And I have the capture paper from 1945. He brought the 3 guns, and we show the guns and talk about the history of the gun and the guy who did it. And it's a salute to our vets. Yeah. So that's one of my favorite things to do on YouTube.
Cool. All right.
Now, can I ask you a question about that date, 1945? I understand with the war, but isn't there a date where reselling a gun changes what you have to do paper-wise or something like that?
Yeah, so the government, ATF has a category called CNR, which is Curio and Relics. So if you have a CNR license, if you had a CNR, I could ship it directly to you. And so 45 and before are all, other than machine guns, 45 and before are under the CNR exemption.
Okay.
So we buy and sell guns to people who have a CNR. If you don't have a CNR, I can mail you a gun, but I have to mail it to your local dealer. You go there and fill out the forms and go through the background check. Okay. The CNR does away with the background check. You can buy 100 guns a week with a CNR as long as they're 1945 and before.
Yeah, but these are these are operational
guns. I
thought
that date was a magic date. So
it's it is a magic date for a lot of people, and my caution is guns from 1944 can be just as lethal. So far, I've never heard in the news or ever had an issue with any of our customers using a gun in anger.
Right.
And you just don't hear about people robbing banks with German Lugers.
Yeah.
So far, it has not been a problem.
All right. Hey, this has been fun. All right. If you're listening to the audio podcast only, we have a video version on our Cracking the Code of Spy Movies channel on YouTube, where you can actually see some of the guns Tom Whiteman's been talking about here. All right, that's a wrap. We'd like to thank our special guest, Tom Whiteman of Legacy Collectibles, for taking us on a quick-fire tour of the Walther PPK. You can check out his website at legacy-collectibles.com and his YouTube channel, which is fascinating. I've watched a bunch of them. Search Legacy Collectibles. Hey, Tom, thanks a lot. This has been a blast.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it, Tom. This has been great.
This has been Dan Silvestri
and Tom Pizzato
of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, too. And while we're at it, why not fire off a quick 5-star review for us on your favorite podcast app? Thanks for listening. We appreciate it.